What's up, Tailgaters? You're in the booth with Tailgate Nate today. The road to predict all 136 FBS level college football teams now takes us to Manhattan, Kansas. We are going to be talking about the Kansas State Wildcats and a little bit of a disappointing season relative to what they've seen out of this program before. They want to get back on top of the Big 12 Conference. My name is Nate Pope, otherwise known as Tailgate Nate. Thank you so much for clicking on this video and helping to support the channel. If you would like to support the channel even further, please do what it says below me. Hit that subscribe button, and while you're down there, hey, you might as well ring the bell because turning notifications on ensures that you're not going to miss an upload during prediction season, especially not one of your favorite team. I'm a sports media grad delving into the professional world of the industry, and if you want to see all the cool stuff I get to do while getting updates on what goes on this very YouTube channel, please give me a follow on social media, Twitter or X, whatever you prefer to call it, and Instagram. It's at TailgateNate29. Feel free to even email me, tailgatenate29 at gmail.com. Thank you so much for supporting me and the channel, however you all may be doing so. And with all of that said and done and out of the way, let's now talk about the Kansas State Wildcats and your head man in Manhattan. It is Chris Kleiman yet again. All right, preview and predictions work like this on the channel. The offense is going to be to my left. The defense is going to be to my right because we go through a roster overview first. And then we're going to go ahead and take a look at the Kansas State football schedule, give it a game by game preview and prediction, and I'll tell you what I think about the Wildcats this season. Again, like I said, they want to get back on top of the Big 12 Conference. A little bit of a down season compared to relative expectations last year, but this is a team that adds a lot, is trying to replace a lot, but adds a lot of nice talent, which we're about to talk about here in a little bit. Returning production numbers and recruiting and portal ranks are down below me. Some numbers for your viewing pleasure to give you an idea of the talent that is on this Kansas State team. We'll talk specifics further, but the returning production numbers are according to ESPN. They do include transfers up to a certain percentage, and your recruiting and portal ranks are per 24/7 Sports. Let's start with the offense and your offensive coordinator, Matt Wells. Avery Johnson is going to be returning at the quarterback position this year. Now, Avery Johnson last season, first year as a full time starter, you got a little taste of him in 2023, but you got the full course meal in 2024. 2,712 yards, 25 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions on 58.3% completion. We'll talk about some of those numbers later. As far as his rushing stats, he is a dual threat quarterback, was the team's second leading rusher, 605 yards, and tied for the team high with 7 rushing touchdowns. I don't think that his ability as a runner is questioned, but it is some of his passing ability that provides some skepticism, right? Specifically with some of his decision making. 58.3% completion and 10 interceptions are numbers a lot lower in terms of the completion percentage and a lot higher in terms of the interception than I think a lot of Kansas State fans were expecting to see from last season. The expectation around Avery Johnson, I think, was a little higher than the production value that he put out this year. I think the production is going to increase this season. And I think a big reason why is you got some more weapons in this pass catching room, some better weapons, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit later. But for right now, let's focus on Avery Johnson. I think his decision making is going to get better. He's still a nice threat to run. Teams have to respect that in today's day and age of college football. There is a lot of development left, but I expect improvement from Avery Johnson this season. Now, as far as the talent around him, you are going to be losing a 1,300-yard rusher in DJ Giddens. To be more specific, 1,343 yards was tied with Avery Johnson for that team high 7 rushing touchdowns and averaged 6.6 yards per carry. That's going to be a really, really hard guy to replace, but there is some confidence in this K-State running back room because it is very, very deep. In fact, it could go 4 deep because you are getting Dylan Edwards back, who was the team's third leading rusher, had over 500 yards and 5 touchdowns for this team last season. You're also getting Joe Jackson back, as well as a pair of transfers. Antonio Martin, originally committed to University of Louisiana Monroe, or ULM, in the winter portal, and in the spring portal decided to re-enter and is now committed to Kansas State. He wants to prove that he is, quote, the real deal. And well, he was at his previous school at Southeastern Louisiana, where he rushed for over 1,200 yards and 11 touchdowns while averaging over 5 yards per carry last season with the Lions. Pretty good numbers there, as well as Gabe Ervin is coming over from Nebraska. Got lost in a running back room there. Talent is pretty high there with Gabe Ervin as well. I think highly of Gabe Ervin. So you have a running back room that can go, let's see, one, two, three, four deep. Are any of them as rawly talented as DJ Giddens? To me personally, I think not, but it is a lot deeper of a room. You got some more options, and I think you're going to utilize a lot of those guys, including Avery Johnson's running ability here this upcoming season. As far as the talent that Avery Johnson will be throwing to, well, your leading receiver in Jace Brown is going to be coming back to this team. Jace Brown last year, 823 yards and tied for the team high 5 touchdowns with the tight end that we will talk about later. You already see his name over there on screen. Now, when you are talking about the rest of this wide receiver room, no one else had more than 30 catches, and no one else had more than 400 yards. No one even provided half the amount of production that Jace Brown did last season. That's a problem. It's going to get better this year. A trio of transfers are entering this room. I think give you more versatility. I think give you more depth. And I think give you some true number 2 options behind Jace Brown this season. You're going to have Jerand Bradley, who's coming over from Boston College. You're going to have Jaron Tibbs, who's coming over from Purdue. And you're going to have a guy who was a dog at New Mexico and Caleb Medford. All of those guys, I think, are going to be some really, really solid options behind Jace Brown in this wide receiver room. And Avery Johnson finally now has a plethora of weapons to throw to. The depth is going to change. Your second leading wide receiver, Keegan Johnson, is transferring out. He is actually going to New Mexico, so him and Caleb Medford are swapping places. To me, that's an upgrade. I like Medford a little bit more than Keegan Johnson. And again, you just overall have some more depth coming in here to this room. When you're talking about the tight ends, Garrett Oakley is going to be coming back, leading receiver out of the tight end room last year, 236 yards and 5 touchdowns. But a 5-star freshman is entering the fray, the highest rated recruit that Kansas State has brought in this cycle. In fact, I think one of the highest rated recruits that Kansas State has brought into their football program ever, and that is the 5-star tight end in Lincoln Cure, 30th rated player overall according to 24/7 Sports, and the number 1 rated tight end, the number 2 overall rated player out of the state of Kansas. He went to Goodland High, and I think the guy is going to be a beast. How much, does he really impact this tight end room this season? We'll have to wait and see. But I would imagine that he's going to be the number 2 option behind Garrett Oakley. If not, maybe at the end of the season, if he explodes, could be that number 1 guy. I think Lincoln Cure is a very, very talented football player. 3 offensive line roles are going to need filled, but you get plenty of portal pieces to enter, and Sam Hecht and Taylor Portier are going to be back for this offensive line. So you look overall at this offense. Avery Johnson should improve. Your backfield, maybe not as talented, but it is deeper. You got 4 really solid options back there. You finally have some depth in the wide receiver room behind Jace Brown. Lincoln Cure is going to be added to the tight end room, and you got some transfers. I think the offensive line is going to be just fine. Pretty dangerous unit so far. Well, let's talk about this defense now. Joe Klanderman, his 3-3-5 scheme is run really, really well, is very tough to prepare for, and sees plenty of versatility. He can turn that 3-3-5 into a 4-man front. If he brings those linebackers up, now you have a 6-man front, and the ability to disguise blitzes and things in there is second to none. Maybe, you can talk about Jim Knowles over there at Penn State, but Joe Klanderman, really, really good defensive coordinator. There have been some shakiness with the Kansas State defense, especially last year. Not a lot of fans, and even it seemed like at times the coaches didn't really trust their secondary. But we'll talk about that when we get there. Let's start off by talking about this defensive line. The defensive line, Brandon Mott is going to be off to the Bay Area. I believe he is now with the San Francisco 49ers. And the Big 12 Defensive Player of the Year last year will now no longer be with this Kansas State team. He was really, really good during his time with the Wildcats, including last season, 46 tackles, and led the defense with 8.5 sacks, more than double what anyone else contributed to the team last season. However, most of the rest of the defensive line core is going to be staying intact here this season. You do have Chidi Obiazor coming back. Damian Ilalio is coming back. Cody Stufflebean will be back there as well. And then a lot of this depth, very, very experienced, very, very talented. Even though you lose your best defensive lineman from last season, I do believe that you're still going to have some really, really good guys in this defensive line room. Now, when you move on over to talk about the linebackers, they are going to be a very key position for you this year. There is some talent that leaves this room, but you do get two very exciting pieces back. That is Austin Romaine, the 96 tackles and 2 sacks to go along with 2 passes defended from last season. I do believe, yes, Austin Moore. I don't think you're going to be with him this season, but you do get Desmond Purnell to come back. Believe 4 sacks for him last season. That's correct. And then a massive transfer coming over from Ohio State in Gabe Powers, getting a little bit lost in that linebacker room over there, decides to come over to Manhattan, and he's going to play a massive role, probably as that third starting linebacker behind Austin Romaine and Desmond Purnell. Now, let's talk about the secondary. It was a massive liability last season. It just overall did not have bright moments and really was not that great overall. And you are losing 3 key pieces out of that defensive backfield. You're losing some absolute monsters there, most notably led by Marquez Sigil, who is also going to be going over with Brendan Mott to the Bay Area, and a couple other pieces as well. It's just going to be tough to try to replace those guys. Another one out of the cornerback position there is Jacob Parrish. He's going to the other Bay in Tampa Bay. But when you were talking about some of the secondary pieces returning, it is vital and huge when they get VJ Payne coming back. He's a massive returning piece, second leading tackler, had 64 tackles, did have 2 picks last season, which was second on the team, only behind Marquez Sigil. Again, the aforementioned loss. Out of that safety room, you get some other really talented pieces back, but as well as 2 transfers coming in, you get Gunnar Maldonado and Amarion Fortenberry that will be coming in to play corner and safety for you, respectively. Again, they don't really play a true nickelback per se. They have a short safety and a free safety, and then they have a third safety that sort of acts as that nickelback, even though they don't really refer to it that way. So, a defense bringing in some good transfers. You lose a lot of pieces. Overall, though, again, Joe Klanderman, I think that secondary is going to improve for him this year. I still think that defensive front is going to be really, really tough. The linebacking unit could be one of the best in the Big 12 this season with the 3 players I mentioned earlier. I think Kansas State's got a really good case to get back on top of the Big 12 this year, but how does their schedule look? Well, let's find out right now because this is the 2025 Kansas State football schedule. But before we get to this, some numbers I want to make you aware of down below. These numbers are brought to you by FanDuel. No, it's not me telling you where to place your money. They are current as of this video, but they are subject to change. And in the Big 12, especially that conference number fluctuates a lot. Just a little, context to how good the people in Vegas think Kansas State is going to be this year. And as it currently stands, it has flipped. When I recorded the Arizona State video a couple of days ago, they were behind Kansas State. Now Arizona State is plus 550, and Kansas State is the second team favored to win the Big 12 conference with that plus 600 mark. National title odds, a very, very steep plus 1,200, or I should say plus 12,000. The odds makers think a lot has to go right for Kansas State this season, but this still is a very talented team. Win total set at 8.5. Let's see if they get there in the wild, wild Big 12. They are going to start out with the Big 12 matchup week 0. This is the Ireland game. The Big 12 is now going over to Ireland. It was the Big 10, then it was the ACC. Now it is the Big 12, and I think this is going to be a heck of a matchup here between the Iowa State Cyclones and Kansas State Wildcats. Iowa State's got a lot of really good returning pieces, too. Rocco Becht is coming back at quarterback. Carson Hansen is coming back at running back. Lots of good defensive pieces return all across that field. Now, you are going to be losing your top 2 wide receivers in Higgins and Noel. You get some transfers in to try to fill that gap as best as possible. Chase Sewell and Xavier Townsend, but you get the feeling it's got to be a deeper wide receiver room for Iowa State this season. I still think this is going to be an absolutely phenomenal matchup here. I really like both quarterbacks and Becton Johnson. I really like the talent surrounding, but I think the Kansas State talent is just a little bit better. Now, I think it's going to take time for both of these wide receiver pieces to really fit in, but I think the depth in the skill position room, and especially the fact that I think this is a Kansas State defense that, look, and not necessarily take off this Iowa State passing game, but the secondary that gave you trouble last year, A, I don't think is going to give you as much trouble this year, and B, Iowa State now does not have their two better weapons to be able to fully exploit some of the issues that may be prevalent in this Kansas State secondary. With all of that being said, I am picking the Kansas State Wildcats to beat the Iowa State Cyclones in Ireland, and they will kick off the season with a win. Since they are one of the few teams that play in week 0, they actually get 3 bye weeks this year. They don't come relatively soon, though. North Dakota, yep, I think that's going to be a win there for you. Should be pretty easy. Army, they're losing Kanye Uno. They're losing a couple of other pretty talented players there. Are the Black Knights still going to be a good team? Yeah, absolutely. But I don't think that they are going to beat Kansas State. They could give them a fight. Don't think the Black Knights will beat the Wildcats, and Army goes down. Kansas State starts out 3-0. Let's keep the train rolling. I think they start out 4-0. Now, Arizona, apologies to the Arizona Wildcat fans out there. Arizona, I think, is being undervalued a lot this year. I really like that head coach that they brought in this season in last season in Brent Brennan. I really, really like him. And look, you get Noah Fafita back, a really talented running back transfer in Ismail Mahdi, some really good wide receiver pieces, including Chris Hudson, guys that I like a lot. The offensive line should get better this year. The defense returns a lot and should get better this season. I think this is going to be a tough game for Kansas State to go on the road and win. However, are they more talented? Yes. Absolutely. Kansas State should be able to go on the road. And this is going to feel like a game that you probably want to win, that you're probably going to have to win. But at the end of the day, this is an Arizona team that I like a whole lot better than what people are giving them credit for. I think the Wildcats are going to make it a fight, but the Wildcats are going to win. Talking about Arizona giving them a fight in Kansas State. Of course, you see the green text coming out victorious in that matchup. And after their first bye week, I think Kansas State is going to beat UCF as well. How's about that? We'll switch it up to Central Florida there. I like that a whole lot better than just UCF. Entirely new team because of the transfer portal. Taven Jackson at quarterback, Jaden Nixon at running back. You'll have guys like Marcus Burke, DJ Black, Dwayne Thomas in at wide receiver. Entirely new defense. But you have a guy that's been there before and won there before in Scott Frost. He's not coming off the best coaching stint at Nebraska as of a couple years ago, getting back into coaching here at a place he's familiar with and won a lot before the infamous national championship year in the undefeated season. I think this is the Central Florida team that, give it a year. It's been left in a mess after the Gus Bus left, but I do believe give Scott Frost some time. Central Florida can be back and be pretty competitive. I see them being competitive this season, but maybe not up to the level of the Wildcats. That's a win there for Kansas State. Now you have to go on the road against Baylor. The chaos in the Big 12 is going to take over at some points, but this is a Baylor team that I think really can compete with Kansas State this year, and I do have the Baylor Bears handing Kansas State their first loss of the 2025 season. This is the Baylor team that's got a ton of phenomenal talent. Sawyer Robertson is coming back at quarterback. You have some really good pieces in that running back room. Yes, the eligibility thing with Ashton Hawkins is a big old mess, but you still got Kobe Prentice transferring in. You still have Cole Wilson transferring in. Josh Cameron, your lead receiver from last year, is going to be coming back, as well as a lot of good defensive pieces return, especially in that secondary. I think they're going to be able to lock down what Kansas State does on the outside. Not to mention it's a home game here for Baylor. Give me the Bears, baby. I'll take them to beat the Wildcats and hand Kansas State their first loss of the season. However, I think Kansas is going to rebound nicely in their next two games. They get a game against TCU, in which, hey, you still got to watch out for the Horned Frogs this season. Don't you dare discount what Sonny Dykes and TCU are going to be doing this season. Josh Hoover returns. You get some really nice pieces in through the transfer portal in the wide receiver room. Lots of good defensive pieces come back, including Bud Clark, who was on that national championship team in 2022, or I should say the team that made the national championship, right? So Again, this is a TCU team that's got a lot of good experience, got a lot of great players, but I do think Kansas State will beat them this season. At home, or I should say on the road against Kansas after a bye week, kind of like the Ohio State-Michigan thing, right? Prove you can win the game. Kansas had a great shot to do it last year. They couldn't get it done, even though this is a road game for the Kansas State Wildcats. We all know who controls this rivalry, and there are a lot of questions with Kansas this year. Yes, Jalen Daniels is coming back, but what version of him do we get? How healthy is he going to be? You're losing a ton of production offensively and defensively for the Jayhawks, and even though I think they can have a nice season this year, I don't see them beating the Kansas State Wildcats. You know a team I do see beating Kansas State, though? In fact, I actually see this team beating quite a bit of opponents this year. Texas Tech, I think, is just going to be really, really freaking good. Baron Morton comes back, and it's got a lot of great talent surrounding him. Some really nice returning pieces in the wide receiver room, as well as a transfer in Reggie Virgil. I think will slot in and play very, very nicely. Quentin Joyner is back there at running back. A defensive front that is rebuilt, but has monsters off the edge in Romello Height and David Bailey. Some really good returning pieces in that secondary. I think the Red Raiders are going to win a lot of games this year, and I like Joey McGuire. Again, the chaos of the Big 12 taking over. I know it's a home game, but I think Texas Tech is a bad matchup for Kansas State. I think they can exploit everything that Kansas State might have a problem with this year, especially that secondary if it doesn't get fixed, which there should still be some improvement, but in case of some underlying struggles, I think Texas Tech will win that game. Oklahoma State had an abysmal season last year. Yeah, they're not going to finish last in this conference again. The number one mistake, well, one of the biggest mistakes, I should say, you can make as a college football fan is to count out the mullet man, Mike Gundy himself. However, Oklahoma State still got some things to work out, a lot of transfers to fit in there, and just overall, maybe not as talented of a team as Mike Gundy has had, but we know what Mike Gundy has done with teams that are not that talented. Put heavy quotes on that. Could be a battle, but I'm giving Kansas State the win. I'm giving Kansas State the loss here on the road against Utah. Now, Utah as well has got a lot of portal pieces to fit in here and to try to rebound from a very disappointing season last year. No more Cam Rising. He is finally gone. So Devin Dampier is coming over from New Mexico, where he was a dual threat monster. Now his passing ability has got to get better, but he's got a ton of phenomenal transfers to deal with in this wide receiver room. You do get Wayshawn Parker, the freshman running back who led the team at Washington State last season, and we know the brand of defense that Kyle Whittingham teams are going to play like. In potentially his final season coaching, I think Utah bounces back nicely this year, and that's going to include a win over these Kansas State Wildcats. A home game against Colorado should be able to win that one. No Shadur, no Travis Hunter. I think it could be a struggle for Coach Prime this season, leading Kansas State to a 9-3 record. That's the reality of the Big 12 this year, baby. Look, I like Arizona State a lot. Thankfully, Kansas does avoid them, but every team in the Big 12, especially every team that Kansas State has on their schedule this year, are going to be competitive. There's no Cincinnati, there's no Houston, and you still avoid some of the heavier hitters, but in reality, this is a really, really tough, difficult schedule. I do think that Kansas State is going to have a pretty difficult time here this year, especially if some of those issues don't get figured out. I see a lot getting better, especially Avery Johnson in that secondary. But again, the Big 12, very competitive. I got a 9-3 record for the Wildcats this year. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Remember to play hard, but tailgate harder. Be back with one more prediction later on today. Goodbye.